Don't forget to smash that like button and to do the subscription and click the bell icon when you subscribe to have a 25% chance of your subscription actually showing up in your subscription feed. And oh wait, there's a new thing YouTube does now as well, where if someone sets a video live, sometimes it stays private for 10 minutes, so do refresh the video as well. And harumph! There's been a lot of talk this week from certain game pundits about whether or not it's exactly fair to call microtransactions in $60 games predatory or exploitative. Coincidentally, and specifically, this discussion revolves around certain games that said pundits personally like. I always find that that's the case. But anyway, regarding exploitation, the thing about exploitative business practices, the thing about the psychological tricks employed to make microtransactions worthy purchases, is they're not universal. They're not designed to exploit everybody. And one of the ways in which these microtransactions are defended, a very common way, is for people to anecdotally say, well, I didn't feel pressured into spending extra money, I didn't feel exploited. But if you say that, then congratulations, you're not the target audience for the microtransactions. You're not the person being exploited. Same with loot boxes. A lot of people say, well, I don't feel the pressure. You might not have a gambling issue. You might not be the person who's susceptible to problem gambling, aka the person that gambling mechanics are designed to exploit. So you can't really apply your own personal anecdotes to this situation, because they are exploitative, because they've got no business in $60 games, never have, never will. They're designed to be manipulative. That's what their purpose was in certain free-to-play games, which is the only place they're even borderline justifiable. Anyway, on the subject of tired excuses made on behalf of the game industry, today's episode is, let's stop doing that, it's making noises. Today's episode is, in my opinion, a belter, mate. An absolute belter, as we go through a lot of the discussions, a lot of the defences, and just, in my humble opinion, demolish them. So this news came out after the Jimquisition was finished, and it's somewhat pertinent. Rockstar's been bragging about having 100-hour work weeks during the development of Red Dead Redemption 2. Now that's not a braggable thing. We'll have to talk about this in more detail in the future, but for right now, let me just say that crunch periods are not a triumph of the workforce, they are a failure of the management. They're not cool, they're not good, they should be eradicated from the fucking game industry. Screw crunch. Bobby Kotick, CEO of Activision, estimated net worth $7 billion. Andrew Wilson, CEO of Electronic Arts, total compensation for the 2018 fiscal year, $35,728,764. Ubisoft, publisher of Assassin's Creed with up to 6 special editions per game, €318.5 million made alone from recurrent user spending in the past year, a figure up 87.4% from the previous year. Grand Theft Auto 5 is the most profitable piece of entertainment media in the history of entertainment media, making more money than not just any video game, but anything with an audience. Thanks to gambling mechanics in its games, over half of Activision Blizzard's revenue has come from in-game purchases, over $4 billion of a combined $7.16 billion. When people talk about the video game industry and the alleged necessity of microtransactions, season passes, DLC, half a dozen special editions per game, product placement and in-game gambling, I want people to remember the estimated financial figures I just highlighted and bear in mind they are just a few highlights, pointing out how much money is flowing into the video game industry and, more specifically, floating up to the executives at the head of the pile. Men like Strauss Zelnick, Bobby Kotick and Andrew Wilson are sitting on millions of millions, billions of dollars. Any single one of them could fund a state's worth of schools in their sleep. They could build a hospital and not even tighten their belts a single notch. And I'm not saying that to hold it against them, necessarily. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the scale we're talking here. Defenders of the game industry will claim that the game industry cannot afford to produce video games and pay their workers a reasonable wage with reasonable benefits, not without exploiting the audience, not without some exploitation somewhere. The fact of the matter is that's simply not true, not when any one of those extremely well-paid executives, of which each publisher has many, could outfit their entire staff with healthcare and job security by going from extremely well-paid to ever so slightly less extremely well-paid. I'm not just tired, I'm outright disgusted by the continued defense of so-called AAA publishers that posit these companies are forced into shady business practices. Recently, someone with ties to the game industry, I won't say who, told me they accepted microtransactions, free-to-play economies in premium-priced games because they had anxieties about not supporting game studios with hundreds of employees, and yet very few of those employees will see so much as a perceptible fraction of what the execs at the top will see from the obscene profits raked in from microtransactions, or, as Ubisoft puts it, recurrent user spending. The idea that a publisher paying its high rankers tens of millions of dollars can't afford to keep the lights on at a studio without exploiting the audience is, in a word, laughable. In two words, it's fucking laughable. Ha ha ha. And with regards to keeping those studios with those employees afloat, well, we'll get to that in a moment. We need to stop pretending multi-billion-dollar corporations are forced into manipulative and reckless monetization because they can't afford to just make and sell games. Making and selling games. The thing they're in this business, allegedly, to fucking do. If you can't afford to do what you exist to do by just doing what you exist to do, the brutal fact of the matter is you don't deserve to exist. Because what are you fucking doing here to begin with? It's not just about the money flowing in, though. The game industry does a lot more than just rake in billions upon billions of dollars year on year to keep itself nice and cozy. The AAA industry also gets away with a lot of shit that other industries can't get away with, thanks to aligning themselves with union-busting lawyers and practically brainwashing a ton of developers into believing the popular lie that organised workforces are the fucking devil. Many publishers provide little recourse for their workers if they so choose to abuse them. As we pointed out in a prior episode, there's a reason why voice actors clubbed together and fought under the Performance Matters campaign for better benefits and contract transparency, and it's because they have SAG-AFTRA, a labour union representing voice actors and other performers. Some game developers sneered at voice actors demanding more benefits and pay than them, without sneering at the publishers who could and should have been paying them more. They wondered why they weren't entitled to the benefits performers were asking for, and as I said before, and will likely have to say again in future, the answer is simple. Voice actors have SAG-AFTRA, game developers don't. In other industries, actors get royalties and performance bonuses for the circulation and continued success of the art to which they've contributed. This has not been so in the game industry. Nowhere was this discrepancy made more evident than when Grand Theft Auto voice actor Michael Hollick voiced his payment concerns. For portraying Nico Bellic, the star of Grand Theft Auto 4, Hollick was paid a $100,000 flat fee without royalties. GTA 4, meanwhile, went on to be a massive blockbuster success because it's a Grand Theft Auto game, and it only continued to print money for Take-Two Interactive. Now, Hollick, it should be said, doesn't blame Rockstar or anything for his payment, highlighting instead the lack of union agreements that would have ensured a more reflective payday. Agreements that have been long and hard fought for as the game industry refuses to do what other industries agreed to do years ago. As well as making more money than most of us could ever conceive, game publishers take shortcuts and avoid financial accountability wherever possible, saving themselves more than their fair share of cash. The voice actor situation is just one example. We've also talked before about how QA testers are paid incredibly low wages, given neither healthcare nor sick days, able to be easily fired for missing a single day due to exhaustion or illness born from exhaustion. The business is rife with layoffs as game publishers hire in contractors who they can let go of the moment a successful game ships and avoid further accountability. Now, remember that argument that excessive monetization in games is fine because we gotta look after those studios with hundreds of employees? More than 1,000 game industry jobs were lost this past year due to layoffs, starting with EA's unfair and absurd closure of Visceral Games last October, including Capcom Vancouver shutting down, and of course Telltale Games closing its doors without paying its employees the severance they were fucking owed. Now, these layoffs happen regardless of the monetization practices of the publishers. Interestingly, major AAA publishers close down studios with merry regularity, kinda putting paid to the idea that microtransactions, the millions and billions they make from recurrent user spending, keep these studios alive. They don't. A company like Electronic Arts continues to implement gambling in its video games, pays its CEO tens of millions of dollars, and makes a fucking habit of purchasing studios, milking them dry, and shutting them down. The list of EA's victims is sad and ever-growing. At least 14 studios have been killed off and buried by the one single publisher, all while it continues to implement microtransactions, product placement, DLC, season passes, multiple special editions, gambling, etc, etc, etc. And don't get me started on the tax breaks pretty much every multi-billion-dollar corporation gets these days, as the richest among us pay respectively less than the rest of us. And that's simply a fucking fact. And tax breaks aren't enough, as Activision Blizzard demonstrated when it was found out just how much dues paying it was avoiding with offshore tax havens. It has a little subsidiary in Rotterdam, ActiCV, where its intellectual property was assigned in order to pay almost $0 of tax on billions of royalties and profit. Tell me again how these companies can't afford to just make and sell games when they're bending every rule in existence to their favour, getting out of paying their fair share toward the economies they exploit, and enjoy a free lunch in many areas of operation. For all their claims of tied hands and necessity, it seems game publishers have no problem disabling these allegedly essential microtransactions and digital gambling dens when it's marketable to do so. Lest we forget Warner Bros. Interactive updating Shadow of War to disable the controversial and excessively greedy marketplace, despite claiming it was just about player choice and not about making the game more grindy to manipulate audiences. The marketplace was removed, the game was rebalanced, demonstrating quite plainly how the game was unbalanced in the first place to contrive a necessity for the game's loot boxes. And of course, there's my favourite example, Electronic Arts removing the loot box system from Star Wars Battlefront 2 at launch after audience reactions were quite rightly outraged by its scurrility, before telling its shareholders that the outright removal of the microtransactions would have, and I quote, no material impact on the money EA was making. A thank you. Ah yes, the shareholders. Now that's an element conveniently forgotten by pundits when they take up for game publishers and plead poverty on their behalf. Because if there is a reason for microtransactions and other aggressive monetization being essential, it's gonna be the shareholders, the true customers of the video game industry. People love to blame the audience here, saying the audience demands bigger games, more expensive games, better looking games, and that's why publishers have to cater to them and have to make the games more aggressively monetized to make up for it. But if audience demand drove what games get made, then we wouldn't have executives trying to tell us that single player titles are dead and that no one likes horror games. We wouldn't see them try and kill off genres that they can't so easily monetize. Shareholders are the absolute, the ultimate customer in this scenario. You, the end user, your cattle to be squeezed for delicious milky money. Shareholders are the customers, the only parties these publishers are ever truthful to, as you'll see if you ever read the transcripts of their meetings. And it's why the excessive decadent monetization of video games won't get better anytime soon, because it's not about need, it's about greed, it's about want, it's about the desire to make more money this year than last year, because that's what the shareholders want, it's what they've come to expect. That's what it's all about. It's what it's only ever been about, making more and more to keep shareholders satisfied. They expect more, they demand more. And because game publishers have gone so far overboard in their monetization practices and consequently dragged in so many millions and billions of dollars in revenue, they've created their own pressure to make even more. That's pretty much how the system works. If the graphs aren't all trending upwards, then anything short of that is total failure. They raised the bar so high that they're only going to get worse in a bid to top an already astronomical amount of profit, because that's what the investors have come to expect and want, not need, want. How can you keep topping yourself when you keep setting the bar so fucking high? Well, that's what we're seeing now. That's what we're in right now. They made a rod for their own back on this one, so that's why we have so many special editions for Ubisoft games that we need spreadsheets for so we can work out what content's in what package. It's why even buying the gold or the ultimate or the mega super definitive edition of a game isn't even enough to get all the content, because some DLC has to be squirreled away for the inevitable Mountain Dew or Doritos or Totino's tie-in. It's why you can buy the most expensive edition of a game imaginable and still get offered XP booster packs and the like, since not even the most luxurious purchase option is enough for a publisher anymore. It's why Electronic Arts is so committed to perfidious gambling mechanics in FIFA and prepared to break the law in countries like Belgium who've outlawed it to keep the gravy train a-running. It's why Activision Blizzard is the richest third-party game publisher around and still employs loot boxes in all its big-name games, all while profiting off tax havens. There's literally no such thing as enough money for these companies because they opened a Pandora's box of limitless profit and recurrent user spending, and it's only set investor expectations higher and higher. And if they're ever in danger of not meeting those ridiculous expectations, well, they can always have a round of layoffs, can't they? Meanwhile, Satoru Iwata took salary cuts in lieu of making his employees at Nintendo suffer whenever the investors were disappointed. While Unicronic Arts swallowed studios whole and chewed them to bits before shitting them out, Iwata was taking actual responsibility, but he's fucking gone now, along with the jobs of thousands of people who were shat on from a great height by the fuck machine that is the AAA game industry. A machine that, make no bloody mistake, is doing just frigging fine on the money front, thanks. With or without their XP fucking booster packs. By the way, whenever I do episodes of this flavour, a lot of people fire back with, you know, this can apply to a lot more than just video games. Oh, I know. I know what I'm doing. Sweating like a big block of cheese you'd find at a covered market. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. To wheel us back to the discussion about whether or not these microtransactions can be considered exploitative. And I'm doing it again with this, but most specifically when it comes to certain games that people make exceptions for. I always find that a little bit of a shame. You know, you can rag on Electronic Arts all day long, but once it's announced that microtransactions are in, say, Devil May Cry 5, people call you an arsehole for saying, hey, those microtransactions don't really belong in there because they don't belong in $60 games, like I've been saying for years, without issue, until along comes a game that people are looking forward to, and then I'm the bad guy. No, microtransactions regardless of game. I love the Devil May Cry series. That doesn't mean I'm going to excuse bullshit when I see it. Microtransactions have no place in $60 games. They've never had a place in $60 games. It makes them fee-to-pay games with appropriated free-to-play economies that are designed to manipulate and exploit certain demographics of the audience. Fuck them, fuck that, fuck you, and thank God for me. Obviously not fuck all of you, because that's how audience demographics go. Fuck only a few of you. And if you think that I'm saying that to you, then fuck you. I'm only joking. You're alright, God bless you, God bless you. Microtransactions shouldn't be in Devil May Cry 5.
Everybody's thinking about me.
Oh, Ubisoft! Ha 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 ha! Assassin's Creed Odyssey has a diss in it. It throws shade. Shots fired. There's a character that says pride and accomplishment in it. It makes fun of Electronic Arts. Ah ha 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 ha! When they said that the microtransactions in Star Wars Battlefront 2 was to give players a sense of pride and accomplishment. You know, it's the most downvoted comment in Reddit history. It was quite funny. But this is Ubisoft making that crack, which just makes this hypocrisy, because Ubisoft is just as bad as EA, and it's in no position to fire shots when it comes to bullshit about the game industry. At best, this is just a hello fellow children moment from Ubisoft as they try and appear cool and hip to the latest things, except it isn't the latest, that was ages ago, and it only really works within the context of justifying some corporate bullshit. Here they just repeat it devoid of context for, well, I guess Games Press headlines and subreddit shares. But the only real joke I found in this attempt at a meme, and Ubisoft loves attempting memes, was that it's Ubisoft doing it, and Ubisoft is in no fucking position to throw shade at any other AAA publisher. There's a popular saying, why is Electronic Arts the worst publisher in America? Because Ubisoft's in Europe. And the fact it's in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is itself a monument to microtransaction-born greed, well, the irony has not been lost on me. The only way this works, as a joke, is if Ubisoft is having a go at EA for just using a bad excuse for something that they all, as publishers, agree is okay to do. They're not so much having a crack at EA's greed here as they are EA's incompetence at excusing the greed, whereas Ubisoft are a lot better about it. They've managed to hoodwink a lot more people. Anyway, this is a shallow attempt by Ubisoft to make it look like it's on your side. It isn't, and if it had the Star Wars license, it would be doing just as bad, if not worse, things with it. Ubisoft, it doesn't even know what pride is. Actually, I do take that last bit back. Ubisoft, as opposed to EA, would at least make a good game. and then put bullshit in it. It wouldn't make a bad game first and then make it worse. They do have that going for them. They do make good games, I'll give them that. Electronic Arts does sometimes, but it's really not at the forefront of what they want to do. In any case, this little dose of hypocrisy on Ubisoft's part leaves me rolling my eyes and saying, oh, Ubisoft.